Winner, winner, Jannik Sinner. It's the Italian football chat we're looking forward to here on Serie Chronicles, but I can't help but start with the Australian Open winner, Jannik Sinner, this weekend. Italy's first men's Grand Slam winner for, is it 48 years? I think it was. I may have got that number wrong because I didn't write it down. And I think which had a lot of us captivated through the weekend. Nikki Bandini here. I have with me, as usual, Mina Rizuki and Patrick Kendrick. Guys, did either of you watch the tennis, or is that just not on your radar?
I did watch it. I absolutely loved it, and especially given that Sinner was trailing by 2-0 and then came roaring back. And that's what I like most about tennis, is the way the momentum shifts. It looked like he was completely out of it, and then suddenly you win back a set. Once you win the fourth set, you feel like it's only ever going to be one winner. And it was Jannik Sinner. And he showed a lot more personality than I think we'd necessarily seen from him before, and brought together the whole country. And Italians are very proud of their sporting achievements, and it's nice for them to have some success in men's singles tennis as well.
Definitely. I mean, I don't know if I feel like we've talked about tennis a little bit before, you and I, so I think you do enjoy tennis. I don't know if you watch this one. I think what I find so thrilling with tennis is that thing of momentum that happens through a game when you can be 2 sets down, you've been playing for 2 hours, and then that moment happens, you get the break, and it's like, okay, we might be done here in 10 minutes, or we might have another 2 hours of this still to go. But yeah, I didn't know, Mina, if you wanted to talk about Jannik Sinner, or if you're ready to talk straight about Italian football and the momentum shifts that may or may not be going on at the top of the title race.
I sort of just love the fact that it's not Berrettini, because for so long we've just spoken about Berrettini, and then Jannik Sinner has just been playing really well, and no one's really thought of him. Understandably, Berrettini reached the Wimbledon final, which was like a magnificent year for football, for sport in general in Italy. It was the year that we won the Euros, and it seemed like, we were crushing it in the Olympics. But he won the Davis Cup. He's really been growing. And I agree with you. I think it's a psychological benefit, right? It's about momentum. But staying in the game when you go 2 sets down and then coming back, that is another level of psychological strength. And I think it's very rare to do that. And Djokovic is really famous for it. So it's amazing that he was able to do it to Djokovic as well. To win the final, but also to defeat Djokovic. And he's done it now several times. It's just a shame that all these great tennis players are Milan fans, but never mind.
Well, it is extraordinary. I mean, we should get onto the foot, but it is extraordinary knocking out Djokovic, king of hardcore, in the semi-final. And then Medvedev, who on hard court in Grand Slams had won 50 out of 51 matches in which he wins the first set, to be 2 sets down and do it. Jannik Sinner really did do something else. But to make my totally smooth and natural segue to the football, it's actually not even that hard this time, because this has been such a big story in Italy that all of the football managers have been fielding questions about Jannik Sinner as well. So let's go to Max Allegri, who said before Juventus game against Empoli, well, we're clearly the Jannik Sinner of the title race because we're younger than Inter. But they couldn't get the job done against Empoli this weekend. 1-1 draw, obviously in a game that was conditioned by Arkadiusz Milik's early red card, but still a game that they had in hand after Dusan Vlahovic put them up in the was the start of the second half, wasn't it, when he scored his goal, and which you feel like was a little moment that let slip away from them. Obviously, next weekend is a Derby d'Italia. Mina, do you think this is a big slip, or is it a nothing moment in a long season, just another little break of serve that you can bounce back from?
I wish. I don't think so. I'll be honest with you. This is a ridiculously good Inter side. And I do think it is about the whole point that everyone thinks that Juventus has potentially a good chance of really going for the Scudetto is because they're not playing all the matches. But it's actually Inter that have come back from a Supercoppa, and it was Juventus that dropped points. Listen, obviously we know it was conditioned by Milik. We know potentially that had Milik not been sent off, Juventus would have probably won this. But we can talk about the goal being scored, which was, from a corner, because Empoli have been hideous when it comes to really set pieces and dealing with them in general, and second balls in general has been one of their weaknesses going forward this season, and it's something that Davide Nicola has to address. But what was so interesting is how this man continues to ensure that relegation battlers somehow find a way out of this. You could say, like I said, Milik made this a lot easier, but Baldanzi was, I think that all of us have been waiting for Baldanzi to really show his ability, and he's obviously had injuries going forward. But this was just such a great moment for him. And what was really irritating is that Juve, considering everything that they had achieved, if this was October, I would have totally understood the 1-1 or potentially even been waiting for a loss. But this is now a team that has started to score a lot of goals, that has found its confidence, that feels genuinely comfortable. So I'm really surprised with the fact that they decided to go from a 3-5-2 to a 3-5-1 and not take a few more risks going forward, not throw in the likes of Yildiz and take off the hideous Kostic how many times.
Surprised at Max Allegri not doing
the
most
a little bit. Yes, maybe even for I know it's crazy, but I would have thought that at least not bring Yildiz in with only 8 minutes, as in throw in sorry, it wasn't 8 minutes, he had 12 minutes or whatever it is, but throw him in earlier. I just find that really, it's still Empoli. I don't understand choosing to go and not try to be. I understand the first half, I get it, you want to you close it out, but you've gone 1-0 down and you think, well, I don't need to take any risks. I understand that. As soon as the equalizer goes in, change everything. That is what I find so irritating. You have the squad for it, force them to defend. That I found very, very irritating, and very irritating that I have to watch Kostic play. I do not understand how this man continues to be a Juventus player. I honestly have no idea how this man is. At this point in time, I might even miss Quadrado.
I was wondering where Kostic might sit in the hierarchy now of Juventus villains. With Pjanic, who's been there before. Dybala, Mina wasn't a fan of when he was there.
No.
I think Kostic might be on the way to superseding them. Patrick, I will just say quickly before I come to Patrick, to just make it explicit for anyone who didn't know, Empoli was second bottom of the table. Mina just mentioned it. Davide Nicola has come in. They won their first game with him in charge last round against Monza 3-0. So that was a nice bounce back for them. And Tommaso Baldanzi, who Mina also just mentioned, was supposed to be on his way to Roma. Empoli, I was going to say born and raised, I might be overstating it, but Empoli academy graduate, scoring a brilliant goal. And now that Roma deal looks like it might not be happening. But Patrick, yes, sorry to interject there. I don't know if you want to come back and have
it was
other
important to
thoughts
explain that
on this game.
No, absolutely, yeah. It has hit a snag, that deal, which is a bit of a shame because that was the entire narrative I led with when he equalised, actually, was the fact that he was on his way to Roma. But there we have it. Yeah, there was talk of an 18-month loan deal, I think, as well. But I think one thing that has come out of this is that if Empoli have any chance of staying up, they need to keep Baldanzi at least until the end of the season. Whether they'll manage to do that or not remains to be seen. But that's always been part of their model. I think it's good to talk about Empoli as well, because they're always run the same way for more than 3 decades now. Fabrizio Corsi, the president, they develop players in-house, academy products, and they sell them on when the time is right to keep the club running financially, and they're not afraid to drop out of the division. But this is a slight change in tack in terms of a new coaching change, the third coach of the season, and Davide Nicola's now taken 4 points from 6 to start. And I thought they did well. I think they made the most of the sending off, which was 17 minutes into the game. It's one of those awkward ones where Milik's touch is heavy. In a split second, he tries to atone and then actually ends up exacerbating the problem by lunging in with his studs up, and was always going to be upgraded from a yellow to a red card.
I was going to say, everyone happy with that red card? Everyone thinks that's...
Yeah,
I think so, yeah. In the modern game, with the speed and the force with which he challenged Cherry and caught him around the ankle. So, but yeah, I think it's... I agree with Mina. I think Yildiz was a curious omission. Strange to leave him out from the start, given how well he's sort of unlocked Vlahovic, which we've been saying in recent weeks, and it backfired. It might have backfired anyway, even if Milik had stayed on the pitch. Who knows? Because we don't know how much Juventus would have created. But I think there was certainly a case for Yildiz to come on earlier. But unfortunately, it was slightly ironic, wasn't it? You needed Yildiz on the pitch to try and win the game, but equally you didn't want to then lose a point, and you were hopeful of... Juventus didn't create a great deal. They scored a scrappy goal from a corner, and I think the entire team selection backfired because in a parallel universe, maybe... Yeah, I think so. I think if Yildiz starts, Milik doesn't play, Milik doesn't get sent off, and it's very easy in the benefit of hindsight. But
yeah, exactly. But don't you think that, I mean, considering that Inter's coming up, that this was a chance, like Milik has done well in the Coppa Italia, for example. I feel like he's He had a hat trick not long ago. Do you not think that he also deserves? You think it's Empoli? You think I don't want anything to happen to Yildiz so that he's available for the next game?
Who did Milik score a hat trick playing alongside? Yildiz. It wasn't Vlahovic.
So you think, but you're not going to bench Vlahovic, right?
Well, I don't think Milik and Vlahovic work together. I don't think I've ever seen any evidence of that. So on that basis, I think if you want to rest Yildiz, which is, again, quite a statement from Allegri, if he's saying, I'm going to, he rested Danilo, who was a booking away from suspension. Mm-hmm. Maybe that was a risk as well, because that's, again, a Pyrrhic victory. Okay, Danilo's available for the Derby d'Italia, but maybe with a player like him on the pitch, he might be able to grab a goal, or he might actually stop you from conceding that equaliser. I think it was risky team selection from Allegri, who's got... Has he? Which ones?
I can't remember them because I'm not somebody who remembers things very well at all. That's why I have to do so much research when it comes to what we're doing about the Derby d'Italia. But I don't feel like he's been at his best this season, in all honesty. Danilo, I haven't seen him. I feel like Bremer is somebody I really trust. I haven't been able to trust Danilo, but I can't off the top of my head tell you where I think that. I don't think his absence, or rather his presence, makes that much of a difference, actually. I don't believe that.
Well, it's partly tactical, isn't it? Danilo's maybe more of a creator from the back. He's someone who brings the ball out a bit more. And I can see that as an art. I'm not particularly taking a side on this one. I'm just sort of thinking in terms of what style of thing he gives you. Because I was sort of curious. I was curious to know how, I guess, both of you think that Allegri could have reacted differently to the red card. I mean, Mina, you've talked about wanting those substitutions to come quicker after the goals conceded, and I definitely think that is super valid, because they, frankly, at 1-1 Empoli looked more likely to win than Juventus did. Empoli created more chances from there on out, and I guess that sort of question, still from what you said, Mina, about going to the more defensive approach, it hangs in my mind. What could you do in the 18th minute after seeing that player sent off? I mean, do you think you make a first half substitution to do something differently? Do you think Yildiz should come into the game for a midfielder? Is there something you think that you can do to be more aggressive in this game, or do you think it was mostly right up until that goal gets conceded?
Here's the thing. I mean, a lot of the time I agree with Allegri. I don't always agree. I think I probably would have waited till half-time before I made any huge adjustments, just to see how the game was going, just to observe where
and saying, right, you're off even though you barely started.
Also, I mean, I sort of love people who do make quick choices like that. Zidane is great at doing that, which is one of the reasons why I like Zidane so much. Allegri makes his decisions very late. It's like he plays one game for 70 minutes and another game for the last 20 minutes. So here's the thing. I would have waited. He waited and didn't change anything, right? But then I probably wouldn't have when Vlahovic comes on. If I'm a goal up, then I don't need to change anything at that point. Having said that, when the equaliser came in, I would have probably changed everything then. Mm-hmm. And I think that there was enough time with 20 minutes to really try to change everything quickly, And it's not like he made his changes much later, but I feel like Empoli were really getting into the game. So perhaps even before the equaliser, I would have started to introduce something to ensure that Empoli is now defending more than they're attacking. This is still a team that I think away from home had scored 5 goals. So I don't understand how they are now being allowed to. I mean, I guess, let them go for it, because they can't score goals anyway, except that it's a Davide and Nicola side. Why not take a few risks? Why not show this team that they can go forward and attack? And I think from Allegri, from a psychological point of view, this team was really running confident. And by sort of telling them that you have to go back and defend, takes away something from that. It's like they're not good enough to win against an Empoli side. And I think that is where he went wrong. Because from a psychological point of view, you've just taught your team that when you go 1-0 down, and even when when you've gone one man down, and even when you've gone 1-0 up, you're not taking any risks because this team is not good enough to take risks. And that's how I would understand it if I'm a Juve player. And that's what I don't like about it.
I think it's definitely been interesting the last month. We've talked about it. Juventus no longer winning a cortomuso. They've been scoring heaps and heaps of goals. Dusan Vlahovic with this goal, I think it's 7 in his last 6 Serie A games and a couple of assists in there as well. It has been a different approach. I guess the thing I sort of come back to off this one, given the sending off hat trick, still, I'll be honest, I put my cards on the table. This doesn't affect how I expect the Derby d'Italia to go at all. Whether or not I expect Juventus to win that, we'll talk about it a bit later, but this doesn't really change anything for me. This to me is in a season, you're going to get games where you end up on 10 men early and it doesn't work out for you. That's kind of how I feel about this game.
I agree in some ways and less so in others. I think if Juventus had won, then I think they would have been ultra conservative in the Derby d'Italia, in the sense that, you know, they would have gone 4 points clear. Maybe Inter still would have won in Florence anyway and would have closed back to within 1 point. But I feel like Juventus would have felt comfortable playing for a draw at San Siro. I think now that Inter have actually gone top, I think Juventus, the onus is on them to try and win that game, especially conscious of the fact that Inter will have a game in hand. But I think Allegri, I think it's quite ironic. Allegri, in constantly trying to play these mind games against Inter, I think has actually become too hung up on what Inter are doing.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
and I think that's why he was happy with the draw. I honestly think in his mind he was thinking, we go 2 points clear, it's an extra point on the board, we keep our unbeaten run going, we don't get a second defeat of the season, and there's no guarantee that Inter will win in Florence. Well, the problem is it's backfired because, I think if they win 1-0 with 10 men, that's absolutely perfect. I think when they go 1-1, he's then thinking, we'll stick to what we know. If we can score a goal, great. Maybe a set piece will come along again. If we don't, then we still get a point on the board and we keep our unbeaten stretch going. It's just that Sassuolo defeat. So I think there was a little bit of pragmatism that kicked in, but I think it might end up costing them over the long run, be it this time next week if we're talking about an Inter win in the Derby d'Italia, or come the end of the season if they're a point or two behind Inter and you think back, could you have been more aggressive against Empoli and gone a little bit more aggressive? So yeah, I'm with Mina on that. I think Yildiz, or at least another attacking change, would have just might have given them a chance to win the game. And if you lose it going for it, then so be it. But we didn't see it. And there was also that last kick of the game, which reminded me, it was eerie how similar it was to Szczęsny and Gatti in the defeat against Sassuolo, when Szczęsny played that really lazy square ball and Gatti scored the own goal. And again, it was Szczęsny who just played the ball erroneously, and then the full-time whistle went just as Cancellieri pounced on the loose ball. So again, maybe if the game had been extended for another 10 seconds, Juventus might have even lost anyway.
Well, I did. Well, to say quickly, for anyone who's not got the table in front of them, so Juventus, if they'd won that game, as Patrick just touched on, Juventus would have gone ahead of Inter again with their 2 games in hand. They didn't win it. Inter did beat Fiorentina, which we'll get to in just a second, and so the weekend ends with Inter 1 point ahead of Juventus at the top of the table with still 1 game in hand. The thing that I did think has been quite funny with Juventus and Allegri, before we move on from them, these press conferences with the we're Jannik Sinner, with the cops and robbers analogy that we talked about last week and the provocative nature of that. I'm enjoying Allegri a lot. I also think it's not really landing, because Inzaghi has gone both times. I don't think that was rude. I think that's fine. He hasn't bitten back at all. So when Allegri is there at his press conference going, oh, but I can't say that about us being Sinner because they're a bit touchy, and you think, actually, Inzaghi hasn't been touchy about it at all. He's kind of just gone, yeah, okay, let him say what he wants. But let's get to Inter. They did beat Fiorentina 1-0. Yeah, no, absolutely.
Can I just say, because I've been particularly harsh on Vlahovic, so I just want to say that even when he didn't have somebody playing close to him, even if you're just seeing right now 6 goals in 4 games, he's been really fabulous. Mm-hmm. I mean, a lot of that has to do with Yildiz playing next to him, which he didn't have in this particular match. But I sort of want to give him his props, because his reaction times, it's so funny when you start to score goals, how much all of a sudden you start to really feel confident, and then you start scoring goals all the time. And this particular match, it was just quick, fast reactions, something that I always remember from Vlahovic when he was at Fiorentina, less so when he was actually when he first arrived at Juventus, when he scored in the Champions League. Do you remember? It was like, oh, there's Vlahovic, there he is exploding. And there's a lot about him that, let's say, I haven't liked since at Juventus, but I'm sort of really just want to give him his props, just because I think he scored a lot of goals. And right now he seems to be one of those guys that's like really gunning for showing himself and really proving himself. And it's a shame, because I really think this was a game in which he could have gone another brace had he been allowed to. So I just, interesting to see him sort of start to show us who Vlahovic really is, and make people, I guess, realize that we should have never criticized him. I hope he keeps it up, though.
The real acid test now is San Siro. I don't think he's ever scored at San Siro. So if he can change that statistic, then Juventus might be able to win.
I thought it was a very Vlahovic goal as well. As Mina said, reaction time, sharpness, presence in the box, that's the stuff he does well. The technique isn't perfect. It's not the cleanest strike, but it gets in the net. And I think that's actually what he's always been at his best. It's not about being the cleanest, the most technically perfect, but about being present and switched on those moments. Completely agree. His confidence is up and could be a key factor in the title race if he can score at San Siro. Speaking of, I'm just going to keep manufacturing these segues. You can't stop me. Speaking of confidence in front of goal, how different might Fiorentina be if they had a striker who had that sort of confidence in front of goal? I thought early on against Inter, they looked far the more dangerous team. They did get the ball in the net once, disallowed for offside. And Zola, though, for me, still in front of goal, lacks that killer confidence. And I don't know if you saw, actually, friend of the show, Matteo Bonetti, posted a supercut of Nico Gonzalez's penalties because, of course, what happens in this game is Inter go ahead from a Lautaro Martinez header and Fiorentina have a chance to equalise 8 from the spot. Nico Gonzalez's penalties this season all look basically exactly the same. So Jan Sommer, when he said he did his homework, did not have to do a lot of homework to stop that penalty. Just look at any of the penalties Gonzalez has taken this season. But yes, I thought Inter were outplayed in this game. I thought Fiorentina were the better side. And it's not the first time this season that I've watched a Fiorentina game and thought that, and they haven't ended up winning it. That's not really a question, but if anyone wants to come back off it.
Patrick, I'll give this one to you.
Yeah, I agree to an extent, but then I was watching back the highlights, and actually the big chances fell the way of Inter, to be honest, when you think about it. I mean, there was an opportunity for Carlos Augusto. Farioni chased back and cleared it away off the line. Thuram was through on goal and just randomly slipped over. Lautaro shot one over from the edge of the box. Fratesi had a shot from inside the box. Inter, had they been as clinical as we have seen them, then they could have been far and away out of sight by half-time. But I agree. I mean, there was a risky ball from Sommer early on. He played a square ball and Bonaventura cut it out, and then Inzola was offside. Inzola was slightly offside, as you said, when he had a goal disallowed. There were chances as well for Fiorentina. And they just haven't been able to touch upon the right man. Last season it was Luka Jovic, Artur Cabral. This time around it's Beltran, who's got 6 goals, 4 in the league. It's not really enough. Admittedly, you'd make allowances for him because he's in his first season in Italian football. And the Florentine press in particular, every time there's a big game for Fiorentina, they say, well, Batistuta took half a season to get going and then he scored a big goal against so-and-so and never looked back after that. And they were beating that drum again. And again, it didn't happen. And I don't know, Enzola as well. He's a pupillo of Italiano. He's one of his, he's a little teacher's pet. He played with him in Trapani, played with him at Spezia. So it's the 3rd club that he's coached him at. So clearly he's actually gone to management and said, I'd like him to be here. I thought he actually offered a lot in terms of his hold-up play. Stefan de Vrij had a torrid time, couldn't get near him every time. He was winning the 50-50s. But you need someone working off them to score the goals. And that man all too often has been Bonaventura, nearly scored in the first half. And Nico Gonzalez, who they've missed through injury. That's the irony. Actually, when he came on, he looked really exciting. He'd never missed a penalty in Italian football, but it was Jorginho all over again. It was cold sweats, remembering how Italy didn't go to the World Cup because of Jan Sommer and Jorginho and that staggered stutter step penalty. And Sommer's doing something right for sure. And I think it's one of those when you just realise that it is your year. I got that sense with Inter on Sunday night. I think
really. See, I think I almost felt the opposite about this. And we're gonna have to get into a conversation about the Scudetto, the Derby d'Italia, and what that can mean for the Scudetto. I really wasn't convinced by Inter in this game, and I think Inter have been brilliant so often. I'm not trying to sort of throw the baby out with the bathwater and say suddenly I think this team's not good. I think they've been the best team in the league, but I think if you're Juventus, you look at this game and go, okay, they're not unbeatable. That's not a team that can't be got at. That's not a defense that looks as settled and confident as it has done in recent times. That's not a team that looks as ruthless. I mean,
but the other side of the coin to that, Nikki, is they still won. They still kept a clean sheet. And if you look at those 2 games recently, Verona on Epiphany, 6th of January, Fratesi scores late. Verona get a penalty after Inter should really have scored on the counter, but it would have been brought back anyway. And Henry misses. And then Fiorentina get a penalty to equalise, and Nico Gonzalez has it saved. Even when there are teams that are able to take points off Inter, it's not happening.
Yeah, but you can say the same thing about Juventus when they went to play Fiorentina, and Fiorentina took 25 shots, but Juventus won.
But Fiorentina never looked like scoring in that game.
Right.
It was just sort
But
of
the point is
aimless.
that Fiorentina aren't Juventus. That's why the Derby d'Italia is different. Like, that's why next week is different. Because
so you're saying that Inter's frailties could be exploited by Juventus?
Right.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Fiorentina is what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah. As in, like, they look a lot. I think, Nikki, what you're trying to say is, if anything, they didn't show themselves to be this like team that can't be beaten. You felt like
time to play them.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
To be honest with you, it's weird because like the first thing I noticed was that this is a league that was named as the best league by the International Federation of Football History and Statistics. No matter how much you laugh at that,
Represent.
And I was really happy with that. But then I saw all the penalties this weekend, and I was like, really, this is the best league? Like, we can't even know.
Most penalties, 5, most since 1960 in a single weekend.
I mean, have you ever seen anything more embarrassing than this? And I don't know how to explain. This is the 16th penalty that Jan Sommer has now saved in overall in his career, I feel. And I just don't understand how you would possibly think, let's copy Jorginho, because that's exactly the reason why we didn't go to the World Cup. But sure, let's do that, And I also feel like what I'm really surprised about Italiano is that I think it's time to hire somebody to figure out how to score penalties or work with the team. If Liverpool are hiring a throw-in coach, then maybe you need to hire a guy who understands penalties at this point. But I agree with you, and I understand, like Patrick was saying, the bigger chances fell to Inter. And he's right, the bigger chances did fall to Inter. I don't know how much you guys believe in XG, because when it came to XG, I think a lot of the time these statistics are more annoying than they're right, because at the end of the day, you can create a lot, you don't take your opportunities, you're still a failure, At the end of the day, like if we look at, 1982 and the Brazil-Italy game, I think Brazil has 75,000 chances, but at the end of the day, Italy knew how to convert those chances into actual goals. But in terms of XG, Fiorentina created a hell of a lot more than what Inter managed. The problem is that they don't have a Lautaro Martinez. And I don't understand. It's a little bit like PSG. It's like, it's so clear what you're missing is a great midfielder, and they never buy a great midfielder. They just buy all these attackers. And what's so clear about Fiorentina is that don't buy anything, just buy a great forward. And that's the only thing I would want them to do in this position. But yes, we talked about another clean sheet,
isn't it? It's just always easier said than done. Strikers cost hundreds of millions because they're very hard to find good, reliable ones.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right in saying that. And also, like, when it comes to someone getting like a Mediterranean, he's probably not going to go to Fiorentina. He's going to choose other ones to go to, even at his age, because he's being chased by the likes of Inter or Milan. But it's the backline that I don't understand. We talk about another clean sheet, but I thought that backline looked really shoddy. And I'm thinking, I could really get into that. Like, as in, if it's Yildiz and Vlahovic, I really feel like they have an opportunity against that backline, because it's about physicality. It's about quick feet. You saw how much they fell apart against Sassuolo as well. And I just feel like at that point, like, De Vrij looked terrified. Bastoni potentially could have given away a penalty on Ranieri. And so I feel like that's something that you can really go at. So obviously, I don't know if, it's probably going to be a Cerbi, but I do look at that and think they're definitely a team that I could probably go at. But having said all of that, it is at San Siro. I do feel right now, I have to agree that this is a side that is confident in their ability at the moment. And even when they won the Supercoppa, it scares me that the first thing that Lautaro Martinez said to everyone is, it doesn't really matter, we have to win the Scudetto. And he's really sort of put this in his head and everyone's head. And I do think, like, Juventus have just enjoyed themselves so much with all these snide comments that they've just forgotten, like, what is really important at this point in time. And so, yeah, as a Juventus, somebody who supports Juventus, I'm freaking terrified of the Derby d'Italia.
So to say one thing quickly, because you've already hinted at it, Mina, for our Patreon listeners, we are going to have a retrospective on Derby d'Italia games that have influenced the Scudetto. So there's going to be a nice bonus episode coming up on that. So look out for that later this week. I think we should have a conversation now about what we do expect from that Derby d'Italia, the one coming up. But just quickly to before we close out, talking about this game specifically, I find this stuff tedious sometimes, but this was another game that was influenced by some big refereeing decisions. Lautaro's goal.
Oh, you went there.
Yeah, I think we have
we
to.
should go
I think
there.
we have to.
Yeah.
The Lautaro's goal, he has an arm out on Parisi, which you can see Parisi's a bit off balance already. For me, it's enough on the borderline that it's okay. Parisi is, as I say, he's already losing his balance,
no foul.
but I certainly can see how, at a first glance, it looks a bit more of a foul than it does when you look it back. Obviously, there was the penalty given against Inter for Jan Sommer, which, again, first glance, I felt a little bit sorry for him. He does touch the ball first. Then he goes through into the face of Nzola. I find these ones hard, even with the rule book in front of me, to know what you're supposed to fall on them, because where's the line between dangerous play and legitimate going for the ball, which I think Sommer was. Having said that, Inter did have one which I thought they did get away with in the first half, which was Bastoni holding Ranieri in the box, so perhaps you could even those two out. Are we 9 penalties for Inter, by the way, this season, none in this game, but they've had 9, which is more than anyone else. Are we living in Marotta League? I have to ask it because Twitter loves to ask it. Are we living in Marotta League? I want to know.
No. No, I think the short answer is no. I think if you analyse each and every one of those penalties, pretty much all of them are penalties. I know there was the one, wasn't there?
Good teams tend to get more penalties. It's worth saying that.
That's
the
true.
way into play, they get so many players into the box.
That's
you know
true.
what I mean? And I think Lautaro Martinez is arguably the best in the world at the moment with his back to goal. In terms of, it's not even his back to goal. He's on the half turn. Do you know what I mean? He's just so good at bringing teammates into play or taking a touch around the corner and completely getting away from a player, which often is an opponent fouling him on halfway, and that's fine, but you can't get away with it in the box. If he turns you, then you... And Thuram has won an incredible number of penalties as well. And then, unfortunately, we have too many penalties in Serie A because of the ludicrous interpretation of what constitutes a clear and obvious error for handball. And I think almost everything is now handball in Serie A. And we get used to the way we cover it because we watch a lot of it. But I think if you were to actually take those decisions to other leagues, they would probably just be, waved away quite easily. So I don't think
watching some of the old Deadbeat Italia for the retrospective, there were a few times where I was like, well, that's a handball. And I was like, not back then, it wasn't.
Yeah, exactly.
Things are different.
And I think we should say as well that in terms of Inter's defensive issues against Fiorentina, they were without Hakan Çalhanoğlu and Nicolo Barella. And I think Barella gets around the pitch more than anyone else. And Çalhanoğlu's the one who helps him to keep possession more. And Fiorentina bossed the ball as well. So, and the only other thing I'd say on XG, I'd love to know how that's calculated. I mean, I tried to figure it out. I read Rory Smith's excellent book about it, but I'm still none the wiser, not through any faults of his. But I do wonder whether the penalty is obviously very heavily weighted as an XG, and then it was saved. But I wonder whether the incident leading to the penalty is counted as well when Pavard heads it off the line, because if that counts as well, then actually that's the same passage of play. So if it doesn't count because anything that comes after the penalty, which was then given, do you see what I mean? Like technically, that Pavard clearance didn't actually happen because the penalty was then given for a previous offence, Sommer punching them in the face. And I'm with you, Nicky. I think, what can Sommer do there? If you're a goalkeeper and the ball comes into the box, you come out to punch it. He gets the ball. There's no way of getting the ball and then suddenly changing the angle of his fist so as to miss Nzola's face. If he doesn't punch it, then Nzola just loops the header over him and scores, and Sommer's criticised. I don't really know what you can do there. So I'm at a loss as well. The law says, it's probably dangerous play, so it has to be sanctioned. And of course, you can't go around following through and punching someone in the face. But that would never have been given in the pre-VAR age, because they would have just been, he got the ball first, the follow-through takes him in. I'm not sure. It's so hard to know anymore. You can make an argument for it. I was debating it with the guy who was commentating with Manuel Pascali, who's a defender, and obviously took the defensive side of things. He said, what can you do? If you punch the ball, you win the ball, then how can that be a penalty against you? And so I quite like the poetic justice of then Sommer saying, you know what, I'm just going to save the penalty anyway. I enjoyed that.
It is true, because I've always thought that, like the goalkeeper, that's his area. So he is always the priority. What he chooses to do is up to the goalkeeper. Like, I've always thought of it as in, like, whatever happens, at the end of the day, you're there just to rescue your team from a goal going in. So if you have to, we've seen them punch, we've seen them do everything. if the defender is there, then the defender is there. And so I've always thought of it as being, you see, this is the thing with football. It's become so convoluted, where it used to be a much more simple game. And now with these laws, I have no understanding of things either. But I do feel like one thing I will say is that Sommer seemed to have his hand on his face for a lot longer than I've seen. Or maybe because I'm watching it in such slow motion that it just looks like he's just, the punch just lasts forever. I don't know how to explain,
Yes.
you know?
Like one of those cartoon punches where they just
Yes,
sort of-
I know. It's because if you watch it, because there was this whole debate as well as last night, which they were putting on side by side with Magnan and Lovato, you know? And that looked a lot shorter in the frames than it did when it came to Sommer. It just seemed like Sommer was like forever on his face, if that makes sense, you know? So I don't know if that changes things, because again, this is all in slow motion, you know? So I actually don't know whether that's, I always feel like if you're in the area, it's up to the goalkeeper to do whatever he wants. That is the way that I've always viewed the game. But obviously the rules now are the rules, and they've become so hard to understand that I agree with Nikki. Even if I had the rule book right in front of me and I'm reading it word for word and someone's explaining everything to me, I would still not know whether that's a goal or not. The only thing that I would say is that if it... Sorry?
In the zone, Luca Marelli, as a former referee, was he was equivocating. He was saying keeper has every right to go for the ball, but this is a punch in the face. And you're like, well, where's your line? Like, it's
true. It is a punch it is a blatant punch in the face. So you think that if it's also an unfair advantage if a goalkeeper can do everything they want, including punching people at this point in time. But
have we not just essentially ascertained together that given no one can agree that it's a foul or not, it's not a clear and obvious error, therefore the on-field decision should stand and it shouldn't be a penalty? Isn't this an incorrect use of VAR in Italy? And this is what we keep coming back to. Have they corrected a clear and obvious error? I'm not sure they have. I don't think there's as much debate as to whether it is or isn't a penalty that I think they probably should have stayed with the on-field decision. In the same way, had he given a penalty, I think then it should have stuck. I swear we've had this conversation before, haven't we? Italy, Ukraine.
But it's true.
Yes.
But it's true. I mean, at the end of the day, if you don't know the actual answer, then you should probably let whatever the referee decides go. I completely agree with that. But I would say that if I'm an Inter fan and I'm aggrieved by it, I would think we got away with one with Luca Ranieri. So, and the goal, and poetic justice, like you said, the goal was saved anyway. I mean, because Fiorentina are never going to score any of their penalties anyway. So you can give a ton away against them. They're not going to get any, you know?
I saw a lot of this on Twitter over the weekend. People saying whenever a penalty is incorrectly given, it always gets saved anyway, which is absolutely not my experience of watching football. But there you go. The good
That's
news
confirmation bias, isn't it? You only remember the ones when they were
saved. But Milan's first one, I thought was that was unfair. So.
We will get to Milan, and we do need to. But obviously, we need to talk quickly about the Derby d'Italia coming up. Of course, there will be no contentious decisions in that one. There's a 0 chance we end up back here talking about.
Have we had the referee appointment yet? Tuesday,
no, not yet.
Coming out now, isn't it?
It's probably coming out now.
Let me check the AIA website whilst we're recording.
I really hope if there are any decisions, they go against Juventus, because I can't deal with anything else. You know?
Marotta League, Mina, Marotta League. While Patrick is checking for the appointment. I guess the two questions I want to ask about this game, Mina, I'll go to you first. Is who do you think is going to win? But then also, does this game decide the title race? Like, do you think that the outcome of this game is going to decide how the rest of the season goes?
No, I don't think this is going to be a title decider. Actually, I take that back. It depends. If Juventus wins it, it's not a title decider. If Inter wins it, it could be, because they go quite and because they have a game in hand, and if they win that one, it's quite a distance between them now. So I think it does also depend on who wins it.
I mean, are Juventus happier with a draw than risking the loss here?
Yes, Juventus would much rather get a draw. I mean, if they could, they'll play for a draw. That's what I find really annoying. I seriously hope that's not true. But unfortunately, we know what Allegri's like. If he's happy for a draw against Empoli, then he will be happy with a draw against Inter. And he'll think once they're busy with the Champions League and all that business, then there's a potential that that's when we can make up the points. I think that's his going to be thinking. I almost wish this game came a little bit later, because it would have been a lot more exciting, because right now I feel like it's too early for us to really understand whether or not the winner is it's going to make much of a difference. So here's the thing. What I don't understand also, and I do, this is a pet peeve of mine, because the media were immediately like, oh, Juventus out of the Scudetto race. Last week you thought Milan were in it. Like, what is the Scudetto race where Milan, who are quite a few points behind, are in it from last week, and now Juventus are out of it? And I don't understand this. But I think that this is going to go down the wire. If Inter continue to play the way they are playing right now and have all their players available to them, it doesn't matter which absence there is, whether it's Barella, whether it's Calhanoglu. The only absence that matters, in all honesty, is Lautaro Martinez. So as long as he's available until the end of the season, 19 goals in 19 games, this guy is a phenomenon at this point. So I think that I'm not entirely sure Inter are going to drop any points going forward, to be honest with you. Certainly not more than Juventus can. So if they win this one, then I think it does a lot to change the way that we view the Scudetto race, because I think Inter will be firmly on top and they would have already opened quite a gap.
I see it as a free hit for Inter. I think even if Juventus had won against Empoli, I think Inter believe that they're much better than Juventus. I think I've said it before. I think they deep down they feel a little bit aggrieved that Juventus are as close to them, given how dominant they've been in terms of their points tally and the way they've won their matches. And I think Inter have greater belief that they can beat Juventus in a one-off match than Juventus necessarily have that they can defeat Inter over 90 minutes. So I think Juventus probably take a draw if you offered it to them before the match. I don't think Inter necessarily would. And I do think they see this as an opportunity to create a bit of a gap at the top. They'd go 4 points clear with a game in hand. All right, it's Atalanta at home. There's no guarantee they'll win that, especially as Atalanta look quite good recently. But yeah, it's tricky, isn't it? Because I think unless this game comes from sort of match day 31/32 onwards, and we'll get to that in our special section when we look back over past Derby d'Italias, and especially those in a 34-game season. But unless it comes in the late spring, it's hard to know, because you can always make an argument for it, can't you? You come to the end of the season, you say, okay, Inter finished 2 points above Juventus, and Juventus didn't win either of the Derby d'Italias, so therefore that's when the title was won. Well, then you could say, well, actually Juventus dropped 2 points against Empoli, so that's when the title was lost. So I think it will have a big impact on the title race, but I think if Juventus can avoid defeat, they've got a chance, because as Mina mentioned, there's that very busy programme coming up for Inter. But I actually think Inter are going to win. I know Juventus did the double over Inter last season, 1-0 home and away, but sorry, it was 2-0, wasn't it, the first game? And then Kostic at San Siro. But I've got a feeling that it's going to be, I've got a feeling it's a home win for Inter. Take the momentum out of Allegri. I think if they went from drawing against Empoli to losing to Inter, I just think that's too big to come back from that, really.
Do you think that they think they're much better than Juventus? Because I don't know why they didn't go for
100%.
a complete... So why didn't they try to smash them in the game between them two?
Because I think their self-belief has grown since then, to be honest.
Right, okay. So now you think that
they fell behind in that game as well, to be honest. I think... And I think I saw some ridiculous statistic the other day. They've trailed for 33 minutes all season, something ludicrous like that. And 9 of those have come away, I think, which was when they trailed at Juventus Stadium. There was Allianz Stadium, as we must now call it. So,
but now you think that they've built up their confidence since then?
I think their confidence has been very high since the Champions League final. And I think they're still scratching their head as to how they lost to Sassuolo and how they drew against Bologna, given that they led 2-0 against Bologna at home. They were 1-0 up against Sassuolo. And now they've come back from the Super Cup having won fairly easily. All right, the Napoli game, they only won it in the last minute. But yeah, I think there's supreme belief, which can become complacency. Don't get me wrong. It doesn't, just because you're confident doesn't necessarily mean that you can't slip up. And I think Allegri would love nothing more than to try and expose Simone Inzaghi tactically over 90 minutes and get the better of him. But yeah, my feeling is that it would take Inter to bottle the Scudetto for them not to win it, as opposed to, I mean, Juventus would still have great merit and credit in winning it, especially if they get a significant points tally. But yeah, I just see Inter as big favourites in this match. Maybe I'm being naive.
So Patrick's got Juventus, an Inter win, sorry. Mina, you taking a draw? Have I understood that right, or are you picking something different?
No, I think it's a Juve win.
A Juve win for Mina. Love it, Mina.
I don't usually think that. But I think that particularly because they dropped points against Empoli. Otherwise, I would have thought it's a draw. But because of this, and because Allegri hates when people start thinking that he's either talked too much or don't like him.
Mm-hmm.
Next week, Rabiot's back. Vlahovic is in this. Yildiz starting. I don't know.
Rabiot's a big piece, actually. Much as that pains you to say it, Mina, he's a big piece.
Yeah, it really pains me to say it. Thank you for noticing. I can't believe that right now he's the guy that I have to rely on. But I mean, if you know what would be really the cake, like the cherry on the cake, is if Kostic gets the winning goal. Then I might as well kill myself.
He did last year in this game.
This is what it is.
Goal. That's his most recent goal for Juventus.
Oh,
in March,
let it be.
last March at the Meazza against Inter, the winning goal. So there you go.
Let it
Stranger
be.
things have happened.
If he gets it, there's a part of me that's going to wish Inter have won it if Kostic is the guy that's getting the goal. But never mind. You know?
I absolutely love that Mina has gone there because it means that I don't feel like I have to try and find some balance.
What do you think, Nikki?
I do think Inter are the best team. I think they have shown
Of
some
course,
vulnerability,
they are
and I
the
think
best
it would not shock me if Juventus win. I'll say that much. I think it's in the possible outcomes, but I worry that both of you have been right to say that because it's still this point of the season, Allegri won't show the aggression that they would need to win this game, and I worry that if they don't, it's already been said, Lautaro Martinez is this season's MVP. It's not close. He's the best player in Serie A by a long stretch this season.
Yeah,
and I think that he'll be the difference maker in this game.
Yeah.
Unless something happens to lead us otherwise. We've been talking for a long time about these two teams and these games, so we're going to rattle through the rest so we can get on to talking about them even more in our special episode. But we do need to definitely go to Milan. I think it was really interesting, just actually, before I completely closed down those other teams, I thought Lazio and Maurizio Sarri's comments about sort of being shocked at how far Inter were ahead of Lazio when they played was reflective of a reality right now that Serie A is split into sections, and there is a top section that in my mind is Inter, Juventus and Milan. Now Milan are not in that title race, but I think they're the only other team really on that quality level that can hold a candle to those top two this season. And yet they didn't win this weekend. They drew 2-2 with Bologna. They missed 2 penalties. As Mina was itching to say earlier, the first of them was very dubious. But they've still got to look at this, Mina, and think this is a game they threw away. I mean, they hit the woodwork twice. They had 2 missed penalties. Teo Hernandez thought he'd scored on the rebound to the second one, but doesn't understand that if you hit a penalty and no one else touches it, you're not allowed to kick it again.
This is what I find really astonishing, is that I don't understand how these how are these people being coached? Like, do they understand the rules? Are we studying opponents? Do we study who takes the penalties? Look, I remember there was this whole thing in Euro 2012 when everyone was like, I was going to use a terrible word at this, criticizing, that's a better word, Buffon, for not studying when it came to the penalties against England. And they were saying, oh, you know, Joe Hart had studied everyone and Buffon hadn't. And there's this whole thing about like why we were so unprepared. But it was interesting because actually what Italy did was use the studying against Joe Hart and went and did everything opposite. So then he was really confused. Yeah. So I think, like, you know, obviously Pirlo really changed that, but there was this whole conversation about how prepared we are. And a lot of the times what I think I love so much about big coaches like, I don't know, Ancelotti, is that he studies the opponent so well. And I never think that that's something that he's ever rated for, you know. But in this particular one, like, how do you not know that if it doesn't come off the woodwork, that you can't touch the ball unless another player has touched it? How do you not work with your team about scoring penalties? I don't know. I just don't feel like there's being enough done in that level. So forgive me. This is another missed penalty. Now, Giroud is racking up quite a few missed penalties, none more important than the one against Borussia Dortmund. But yes, I do think there was a part of me that felt like, you know, justice had been served at that point. When it came to this game, and when you're saying Milan are probably the best at trying to, in terms of quality, I still don't see as much quality as I want to see from Milan. I don't know how much I see them as being different to Bologna, to be honest with you, because Bologna don't have the necessarily technique on paper, but I think that they are a side that works so well together as a team. And Xerxes, I never know how to say his name. I always feel like I'm saying it wrong, but him in particular in this match deserved to win everything. So I just thought he was wonderful. But then Loftus-Cheek has really come through for this match as well. So I look at it and I think they're on par. So I actually feel that 2-2 is a good result, but I understand. And then when you miss penalties, you think that Milan should have won this, and I understand that. But I also think just for the way that Bologna played this match, they deserve to get a point out of it.
Patrick?
I have some sympathy with Teo Hernandez because I think it happens so infrequently that I think instinct kicks in. You know, you hit the post, it breaks back to you. I think it would take extreme lucidity and mental strength to sort of restrain yourself from then knocking the ball into an empty net. And maybe you think you might get away with it as well. You know, strangely, you occasionally have these miscarriages of justice where the referee doesn't. Well, I guess in the age of VAR that would never happen. But it's a weird one, isn't it? I think, it's such a rule that is so rarely, or a law that's so rarely invoked, that I think, you know, the only thing I can think of is probably that famous Ronaldinho advert from years ago when he volleyed the ball against the crossbar from outside the box several times in a row, which I think was actually probably photoshopped or CGI or whatever, but that's probably done people a disservice, because then I think maybe it's deeply rooted in people's minds that you can just hit the woodwork and then go again. But, you know, if you were to hit a free kick against the crossbar and then the ball loops up and you were to run in and try and head in the rebound, that wouldn't count either, which is a weird one. So, yeah, I think the trick is to try and score penalties and not hit the post. But yeah, it was just a weekend of missed penalties. Josef Martinez of Genoa saved one. Stefano Turati of Frosinone saved one. Milan missed, Teo missed one. Giroud had one saved by Skorupski. And again, I think it's even more damning, isn't it, when it's not only saved, but the goalkeeper holds it. So there's not even, because that's the irony, isn't it? If Skorupski parries that away and someone scores the rebound, then that does count because someone else has touched it. The one time the ball does break to a Milan player on a rebound from the penalty, he can't then score because he's the one who's hit it into the post. So sometimes just things don't go your way. I agree. I thought the penalty on Kjaer was absurd. Kjaer ducking his head down, Lewis Ferguson catching him. But on that basis, I mean, you could get a really enterprising... Who was it? It was John Terry used to do it, didn't he? He used to throw his head in the way of things. I remember Danilo D'Ambrosio earlier this season, Juventus against Monza, threw his head in the way of trying to block the Gatti winner, didn't manage it. That's because Gatti completely miskicked the first attempt.
I love that one.
Could be key to the deadbeat Italia. He's either going to get the winner or make a crucial mistake and be exposed.
Yes.
You just can't keep him out of the headlines. But yeah, so I think if you were to find a really cynical player who had no mind for his own safety, you could even turn that into a tactic, couldn't you? You could see a player about to clear it in the box and say, just drop to your feet and put your head between his boot and the ball, and therefore he kicks you in the head and that's a penalty. I mean, no one's going to do it because it's a ludicrous notion, but I thought it was a preposterous penalty to award.
Preposterous.
I think,
And he was sent off. Thiago Motta was sent off.
I thought was a penalty. The second one, I saw.
Yeah, the second one was a penalty.
That neither of them should have been. I thought the second one was correctly given, but definitely insult to injury for Milan that they then suffer the equaliser on a penalty in the 91st minute. You fail to score 2 out of 2. Your opponents get one and they score it. It's a way to drop points. But
with a lot of pressure, by the way, to get that in the last minute to rescue a point for your team. It's a lot of pressure for Orsolini. So I thought that was brilliant.
Really well taken. And to echo Mina, Joshua Zirkzee is a special footballer. He's going to end up getting a lot of attention, I think, this summer. Bologna are probably relieved, even frankly, just have got through January without having to field any strong bids for him because he is going places, I think. Milan looking pretty steady in third place, 46 points. That is a 10-point buffer to Atalanta behind them at the moment. Atalanta do have a game in hand, but they are looking pretty good still in that situation. Bologna currently down to 8th, but there is only 3 points separating them from Atalanta. So that race for the last Champions League place, or places, depending on whether Italy gets 4 or 5, is going to be fierce. I want to get to Roma, who've won 2 out of 2 under Daniele De Rossi.
Yes.
I think this is such a sort of coming back to the XG conversation from before. I haven't seen the XG for this game, and I'd be curious to, because it's a game from which you could pull many narratives from the numbers. I saw some people celebrating the fact that, oh, look, it's Roma playing against a lesser team, certainly lesser in the league standings, and dominating possession, which they did. They had more than 60% of the ball. And this sort of sense of, oh, we didn't do that under Mourinho. Mourinho, we were always being more cautious. But at the same time, 15 shots for Salernitana, 7 of them on target, compared to 5 for Roma, 2 on target. It was an odd game. I think that Roma just about deserved to win it, but they weren't compelling. Certainly, though, it's kind of a nice narrative that De Rossi comes in, Capitan Futuro, who eventually became the captain himself, and the Roma's new Roman captain, or not so new, but current Roman captain Pellegrini, seems to be suddenly scoring goals and delivering his best performances again.
That yellow and red blood coursing through his veins. Yeah, no, that's been great. He scored a nice goal against Verona, took his goal. Well, it was an easy finish last night, but timed his run really nicely. It's good to see, because Pellegrini I think he got 11 goals, if I remember rightly, the first season under Mourinho, and Mourinho was getting a lot of credit initially for sort of inspiring him playing in a slightly more advanced position. Then he'd gone really quiet in front of goal, and the only goals he was scoring were either penalties or the occasional free kick. But nice to see him score twice in a row from open play, and just a bit of more of a clinical edge about Roma. They scored a penalty with their first effort on target. They didn't really look like scoring. It's just silly Maggiore, dangling his arm out for Cristante to head it against him. And then the second goal was nice. That was, there was a Dybala back heel in the lead up to it. And some of those stats are a little bit misleading, because most of the Salernitana shots were from outside the box, and they were comfortable saves of Rui Patricio. And there are 2 efforts on target out of at least 1 or 2 attempts, because he's now unable to hold the ball when it's shot at him. He keeps spilling it, so he's looking more and more like a liability. But tougher test for Roma to come. Yes. They've got another Monday night game against Cagliari, and then they play against Inter, but they're next 2 at the Olimpico. And actually, that was only their 3rd away win in the league all season. It was ridiculous. Yeah, they've taken 8 points from 10 matches on the road. So already De Rossi's doing something that Mourinho couldn't do. The other side of the coin, of course, is people will say that Mourinho didn't get the chance to have home game against Verona and a trip to bottom of the table Salernitana. But that's the way the cookie crumbles. Or the maritozzo in this case, I guess.
I think it's been some people have like a baptism of fire, but I do think this was somewhat easier for Daniele De Rossi to have this kind of fixture list in which you're facing Hellas Verona, Salernitana, and then Cagliari. Especially this Cagliari, which seems to be down and out, rather than the one that we saw that was scoring last-minute goals against Frosinone, with Pavoletti showing us what he can do after 90 minutes. So I do feel like it's somewhat easier for them, but I'm just glad Rui Patricio didn't make a giant error.
Almost.
He felt like he was on the verge of it, didn't he?
He always. But who did you go for? Because Villar is really. They need to buy a goalkeeper more than they need. They're one of the few teams that have good attackers and just don't have a great goalkeeper. It's the other way around for most of them. But yeah, so I don't know. I feel like I've got to see Roma in the big tests before I start giving any judgments on Daniele De Rossi.
But they did score a penalty, which was something that not everyone was making look very straightforward this weekend. There was another actually really big game in Serie this weekend that we haven't got to. And the reason for that is because I almost don't want to make anyone who suffered through it have to relive it. Lazio 0, Napoli 0 was one of the more emotionless games of football I've watched in a while. That was really dreadful. If either of you have anything you want to say, do jump in.
Yes, I'd just like to stress what I tweeted, which is there's a famous Neapolitan expression. When you go to Naples, you cry twice. When you arrive and when you leave. The basic meaning of it is you cry with tears of joy because it's so beautiful, and then you're devastated to leave because it's so beautiful. But to me, it's when you go to Naples, you cry twice. When you arrive, and the second one is when you watch Walter Mazzarri's Napoli play, because they're absolutely horrendous. 14 games, 8 times they failed to score. They have completely dismantled the coach of the year, Panchina d'Oro, Luciano Spalletti's wonderful creation, and it pains me. It's like a dagger to my heart every week.
there's a lot of people out there who don't understand the point of coaches. They say that if you've got a great team, then you don't need a coach. And I always find that bizarre to me, how anyone could possibly think that the coach isn't the most important thing. I actually think it's the most important thing, way more than what players you have on the pitch. And if there was ever a way or a game that could really show that, it is this one, because we have certainly seen the complete departure. For a long time, what was annoying me about Napoli was that they were trying to replicate what they did last season, and it wasn't working out, Not with Rudy Garcia, but more like Mazzarri, who was being forced to play a four-man back line when that's not really what he knows how to do. But actually watching him play the Mazzarri way makes me think, no, you should have continued trying. This is... But can I just point out that this is number 1 and number 2 from last season? Lazio finished in second last season. Napoli won it by a country mile, and we're looking at 2 of the most hideous teams that we have watched right now. I don't understand what is going for either side, Having said all of that, I just want to say, it's important to know that there's no Kvaratskhelia, there's no... Osimhen, obviously, there's no Angry, so there's a lot of absences from the team. I really hate Sarri for not starting Rovella and going for a very muscular midfield in all of this, because I just felt like it really took away any technique, any beauty from this match in particular, even more. Yes, I mean, this was a great advert for why coaches matter, why coaching matters. And honestly, if I was a Napoli fan right now, I would be protesting outside Aurelio Di Laurentiis, and especially if Conte is the man they want to bring in next. They'll win, but the game won't be any better. Sorry.
Is he not going to Milan?
Where do you think so? Do you think he'll go to Milan?
No, I've just seen some reports over some reputable and less reputable outlets on social media have been speculating that apparently Ibrahimovic has let slip that Conte's the next man in and all this sort of stuff. So... we shall see. Watch this space. He's going somewhere. I think he's going somewhere. Whether it's in Italy or elsewhere remains to be seen. But he's got his pick, hasn't he, really? He could go to Roma, Milan. Well, he could go to Roma or Napoli, maybe Milan, depending on what Stefano Pioli decides.
I think this is exactly the moment he's been waiting for on sabbatical, is the leverage of different clubs and being able to pick and choose and see who offers the most, what he wants. Elsewhere, a team we probably do need to start talking about more, because they are very much in that top 4 conversation. In fact, they're currently 4th. Atalanta won 2-0 against Udinese. I just want to say Charles de Ketelaere, Opta stat here, 7 goals and 7 assists across all competitions. There are only 2 other Serie A players who can boast that, which is Marcus Thuram and Olivier Giroud. So I really enjoyed de Ketelaere. I'm glad he's found a happier place for himself in Bergamo. And Atalanta, I think they're still being underestimated a bit in this top 4 conversation. I think there's a very real chance with Gasparini's coaching that they can do that and get in there. Torino won 2-1 away to Cagliari. Genoa with an important win. You were saying on socials, I saw Patrick looking very much like a team that's heading towards a comfortable safety this season. 2-1 win at home to Lecce. Monza beat Sassuolo. Verona drew 1-1 with Frosinone. Was there anything from those games you guys wanted to bring up before we close?
Yeah, just a yes or no answer. Are Sassuolo getting relegated? Quick canvas of opinion here.
Oh,
without Berardi for a while as well.
Knee operation, yeah.
I think they might.
I've got a feeling they might have run out of luck this time around.
Do you know, I'm going to say no though, but it's not because of them. It's because of what's beneath them.
Is this the season when 26 points keeps you in Serie A or something ludicrous like that?
There's a lot of teams down the bottom that are struggling right now who haven't particularly done anything in the transfer market to convince me they're not going to stay down there. Empoli are the one team you think maybe Davide Nicola is going to start lifting them, but Salernitana, Cagliari, Udinese even, there's a lot of teams that I'm not convinced about.
Udinese even there? How are Udinese even there with the team that they have? Like, I don't understand.
Because they never win. They never win a game of football. They draw a lot, but they never win.
I know, it's ludicrous. It really is ludicrous because they have a good team. If you look at that team on paper, it's a good team. I don't understand how they are in the position that they are. I mean, Sassuolo shouldn't be in the position they are, which is weird because Sassuolo is always, they say this is the year of, the year that they're restarting again, and you know, like there's going to be a transition period. But you look at that squad and you look at the fact that they've had Berardi, they have Lorienti, like there is a good enough team there to be doing better than they are. I understand when Salernitana and Verona are not doing well. Verona is doing a yard sale. Did you see that picture of like the Verona fans holding a yard sale? Because that's what they said. There was even a sofa there. They had put out a whole garage sale, yeah, and said that this is what Verona looks like now because they have sold pretty much every one of their players. And yet you watch their game and they actually make an effort, which is, I find bizarre when I look at all the others not making an effort. Sassuolo in particular, I feel like all they really care about is beating the big teams, because when it comes to everyone else, they've been hideous. So,
and they don't keep clean sheets. I don't think they've had a single clean sheet all season or something.
No, but then is
like
this Dionisi being a terrible coach? I mean, they've had so many great coaches, right? I don't understand. Is he a man who continues to be in his position? Should he be in his position anymore?
They're not helped, are they, Sassuolo? Because they have no real fan base. And so every home game, the stadium is either empty or they're outnumbered by opposition fans. So it's not like you can say, okay, we're in a relegation battle, let's try and win our home games and nick the odd point away. It feels like they're playing away every single week, and they're too reliant on individuals. As you said, Lorienti had a brilliant first season. He's been really quiet, barely scored. And Berardi now has his body's holding him back, unfortunately, which is a shame. He's not even 30 years of age.
And on that note, I'm going to take us into the shout-outs. We've had lots of new Chronicles Tifosi subscribers in recent weeks. Thank you so much for jumping on board. For those of you who are still on the fence, we do have a 7-day free trial available if you want to get on that. And hopefully you'll enjoy the extra content we're bringing you guys, like our look back at the historical Derby d'Italia games that we're about to record after this. Please do, Tifosi, if you're listening to this and you are already a subscriber, let us know the content you would like from us. If there's things that we're not doing enough of that you'd like to hear more from us, that's something we'd love to hear from you, because we want to give you guys the content that you are looking for. But for now, shout outs to New Chronicles Tifosi, Jason Gill, Eric, just Eric, Michael Ferrigno, Darren, just Darren, and Rajat Sharma, Adajit Ghosh, and Vegard Berger. Sorry, as always, if I've butchered any of those names.
And I think we have covered absolutely everything, and we've still got plenty to get through on our special bonus feature. I'm really excited already, not only about the bonus feature, but about next week's episode, when we will be breaking down all of match day 23, which features the big one, the Derby d'Italia. But before we sign off today, a reminder to all of our Chronicles Tifosi patrons, join the Chronicles Tifosi chat in the Patreon app. And as ever, you can find us on all sorts of social media accounts, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. All of the links are in the show notes. This episode was wonderfully hosted by Nikki Bandini, ably assisted by Mina Razuki. I'm Patrick Kendrick. We will see you all very soon. Goodbye.
Serie Chronicles is a Chronicles production.